Cyndi with Quilting by Cyndi. So this I've talked a couple times about a quilt that I need to fix. So this is one that I made for my daughter's best friend Angie. It was supposed to be for her wedding. I'm a few years late because I had knee replacement. It got put in a box and then I forgot about it. So, but she loves purple. So this is what's called a log cabin. I'm not sure why, I guess just because you're doing little triangles. So basically similar to the other quilt I showed you, the French rail one. So this is a similar idea. You have lights and you have darks. So you get 3 of each. This one I find, this is the one, was the first style that I ever did. There was one that was called Quilt in a Day. I don't know where my book is, or I would show you. Inevitably, I dig it out quite a bit. I really enjoyed it. But it was something that you could do with a group of friends. And basically, you could come in with all your fabrics. Everybody would sit down in a big group. You could chit chat and whatever, and you all did the exact same thing, which is handy when you're doing a bigger quilt because you tend to need extra hands. I fumble along by myself. So this one, you can't see it. Most of it's hanging off the table because it is an oversized king for her bed. So again, picking out fabrics, go through, sort of see what you like, what looks good together. I had one fabric that I really loved. Until I took it, I happened to take it, one of the squares outside to take a picture of it and realized that in the sunlight it looked brown, not purple, because it was kind of an opaque color. My daughter has had her one quilt. I used fabric that she loved, but the fabric ended up shredding. So she brought me her, a couple years ago, brought me her quilt, and I literally ripped it apart, pulled out, and hers was same sort of idea. Hers was this log cabin look, and I literally I cut in, you know, I ripped out the seam, that's why you need the seam ripper, and went through and stripped out the pieces that were shredding and replaced them. Usually you do in this case, you usually do the big squares. So this is one square. And I forget however many, 1, 2, 3. I think there's 6 wide and maybe 9 long. And then there's borders. So normally you do 2 to 3 borders. I did way more because she wanted it to hang over to touch the floor. So if you're doing something like that, make sure you measure your bed, whatever size, so that you know, do you want a regular size? You just want like a typical comforter that just hangs a little bit over the side? Do you want it to hang all the way down? Do you want it to come up and cover pillows that you can tuck in, touch the floor? So keep that in mind when you're talking about, or not talking, when you're looking to get your fabric. So you can still do the squares, and then to make it longer, that's where I just make more borders. So as you can see, this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 borders. But this border is super soft and squishy. As a token to her husband, the other side, and this again is where I make my life complicated. Most people would have just did a solid color. I did another quilt and sewed the two together. So the other side is this beautiful gray. She just laughed and looked at her husband and goes, it's never going to be on the gray side. But on the off chance you get up and you flip the covers back, it's still going to look pretty. So this one took a long time to do because I started, part of the problem was, again, analytical, overcomplicate my life. I have so many pages in my little book for Angie's quilt. So I was figuring out, so like here, that's for the purple side. How many borders did I need to get the width? So a calculator is your friend. I use it even though I'm a math whiz and do computers. For whatever reason, sometimes my brain goes, what? So I get a calculator to double check myself. And you will see I have pages in here where I literally am just adding things, subtracting, dividing, because I'm too lazy to hunt up my phone to do it myself. But this particular one, I went through, and as you can see here, I started doing a really thin, oh, let's see if I can pull it out for you guys to see it. I started doing, in the middle here, stupidly, you live and learn. So next time I do one of these, I will not do it this way. I started with the width very narrow. And then I got through these and I went, oh my gosh, it's going to take me forever to finish this quilt for her. So I then started bumping up the sizes. So, and they're different textures. So again, picking out the fabrics, see if it looks good together. So this actually, I tried to stagger it to do sort of like the, like you would a Subway towel on your, honestly, that's what I did. Is the Subway towel was what made me think of, on your kitchen backsplash. So it's usually staggered. And I tried to do that, but inevitably sometimes the colors, like you'll see here, they're almost right lined up. I tried not to do that, but again, and I have other pages in my notebook where I literally have these numbered. And then I had piles. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 piles. And I went through and I stacked them up, different lengths, and I went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's one section, and then the next 5, and the next 5. And then I figured out how many I needed. So some of these will get cut short, but I tried to end it so it would look good. But then I bumped it up. You can separate them, like I did here. So I separated the colors, sort of just to give your eye a break, so you can, so you would notice that now this is actually wider here. And then I did it again. And then I just did like a final round of colors. And then again, the border. So what I tend to do when I do these is, and you can do these different ways, I'm horrible at the border. The corners, don't look. It's just, I don't want you to see it. But I wanted to have the soft, like velvet stuff up in your face. So that's why you have that is the last on the purple as well as the last on the gray. So normally when I do these, I pick whatever side I consider the front to be, or the back, whichever way, and I will I'll make it longer so that I can curl it over. So as you can see here, I curled the purple over as like a little highlight. So the corners, I have yet to master the corners, so they look terrible, but it's homemade, it's made with love. But, so this particular one, she has this gigantic dog named Joe. So Joe has come along and there are little spots. There's a giant spot here. You can see where he has put his big feet in and has ripped apart the fabric. So now what I'm doing, and I went through and I put safety pins because I had to, because it's so big, I had to go put it on my bed, turn the lights on, and I literally go through. And this is what I do when I finish a quilt, or I should say when I finish a block. I go through and I make sure, did I get too close? Because sometimes, you're when you're sewing, it'll start, if you're not paying attention, and I tend to watch TV while I'm sewing, or listen to music, it might shift over a little. So maybe your 1/4 inch is now 1/8 of an inch, which means that if it gets pulled too hard, it could rip. Or you have a gigantic, 150-pound dog jumping around on your bed, and this might happen. So it's just something to keep in mind, like when I said before about picking the fabrics. So it can shred. You want to keep that in mind. If you have dogs, try and get things that are a little more durable. If you're making a quilt for yourself, maybe make sure you've got a thicker seam allowance so that as you wash it and the dog is on it. So as you can see, there's a couple spots here where you can start to see the thread, because it was a 1/4 inch, but because of Joe being on it and rolling around, it's slowly pulling it, so it's stretching the seam. So, which I didn't think about because I forgot that she had a huge dog, or I would have did a thicker seam allowance. So make sure you think about that when you're sewing. I usually, before I start piecing it all together, I sit here and I do this and I look. Did I miss anything? Did anything get a little too short before I start piecing it all together so I can fix it while it's manageable? Because like when it gets to be this big, it is not easy to sew. So like these, I'm going to have to be very tricky, and I haven't planned, since this one there's a couple that are like dead center. So it's going to be hard with my sewing machine. Some of the sewing machines, they're out there, so if I get off the cord. So like mine has a very short arm. Some sewing machines have longer ones. So again, it depends what you're doing. If you can get a longer one, that's probably best, but there's not a lot of room here, as you can see. So trying to wedge this through here is not going to be easy. So thankfully this is close. This one is actually close to the edge. So I will use this side, will come in on here somehow. Maybe not. I haven't figured it out. But you can fix these. I mean, you can do it by hand. It just doesn't look as, I mean, you can make it look nice. If you have the patience, you just curl it under and you sew it. You come under when you're sewing, looping it together, so when you pull it together, it's completely tight together and you don't see the seam. It's just very time consuming. But there are little handheld things I've seen that you might be able to use for this. So this one I have to think about. I just haven't figured out how I'm going to get to all the pieces. But as you can see here, so with any quilt, you're going to have the fluff in the middle. You can pick, there is actually different, I don't have any out here. There's different thicknesses of the fluff. Some are thin to really thicker. So depending how squishy you want it to be, or if you're on the, the West Coast or, the North, anywhere where it's extra cold, you might want the thicker stuff. I made one for my daughter and I used a medium and she said it's too hot. She lives over in Oregon now and she keeps it on herself for a short period of time and then she throws it off because it is just, because when I redid it for her, I put new fluff in and she loves it, but she's just like, oh my God, Mom, it's too hot. So, but that's something, so you see like these little here and there, you'll see these little things. So you can do this, and it depends how you make it. So you can make a quilt. I made a quilt for a friend of mine that I video game with, and he wanted me to make a rag quilt, which is the first time I ever made one. I love it. It's very simple, and you actually make a whole block front and back. Then you sew the blocks together. So where I'm making a quilt, making another quilt, and then smacking them together. But when you do something this big, you need to have a way to anchor the fluff that's inside your quilt. So that's what I did with this. I just got like the little, it's not thread, floss, that people use like for needle pointing. So I usually just get that and I'll sew it through front to back. So that way it looks, you actually can't even, where's the fluff? Where's the point? There. So I do it so that I try not to catch too much on the other side so that it's not glaring. But you can sort of do it and you just have to make sure you're good about lining it up. So when you sew it or when you stitch it together, you're not wonky. And when you flip it over and you go, it's like this now. On the other side, it's flat. So just keep that in mind. But it's a good way to anchor. And it's just a little decorative touch that I put, and that's why, my daughter gave me my little button thing, because the one quilt I made for her, she picked out the color button she wanted. So what I did, not that that matches, but I could have put a button here instead. Just decorative, looks cute, but it'll help. But because you sewed it through by hand, it will anchor your fluff. So as you wash it, as it ages, the fluff, if you haven't managed to catch it, it'll start sliding. And, my first quilt that I have in the closet hiding, because I need to fix it, a good chunk of the quilt, the fluff is at the bottom of my quilt, which does not keep you very warm in the winter. So, so this is one of my finished ones. I have some I posted out on Instagram, just of the kids. I make them I made some for my grandsons. Like I said, I made a rag quilt for one of my video gaming friends. Another one I just made, he wanted a little one for his couch, so it's just a short little one, but I made, and I can't think what the pattern's called, but it's like a star effect. Really cute that I made for him. And he's a big Zelda fan, so I used my fancy monogramming for the machine that my daughter got me, and flipped it up. And when you do stuff like this, get your scrap and test it, because you don't want to do it on your quilt unless you know that it's going to look the way you want. always plan ahead. I always do like test ones just to run, you know, because I started doing it and the lettering went like this. Whoop. So then I was like, okay, you can get, let's see, where is it? You can get chalk pencils, different colors that you can make a mark on the fabric. It will wipe off. When you wash it, it'll go away. But you can draw with a ruler along your fabric, so when you're monogramming, you can make sure when you're feeding it through that it's going to be in a straight line. But he loves Zelda, so there was, I don't know enough about it. There's a Triforce thing or whatever. He's going to yell at me when he sees this because I didn't get any of it right. It's like I know Wisdom's one of them, but there's like a Triforce, but it's like 3 colors. It's like red, blue, and I want to say gold. So those are the colors I picked. I had felt, and I just created these little triangles with the pattern, and I put little the 3 things, and then in the because there's 4 corners, in the opposite corner I put the main characters from Zelda, you know, Link and Zelda and Mipha, etc., which is what he named his dog. Hi, AJ. Shout out to you. So you can do whatever you want. Just keep in mind, fabric-wise, color-wise. You know, you can add the touches like I did with this for his, just to make it more personal for him, for something he loved. But you don't have to have a fancy machine to do that. You can, you know, if you like to do needlepoint, you can do that on your quilt and quilt, you know, a script of your whoever's name it's going, you know, that is going to. My grandmother made little quilts for the kids when they're babies, and she put their names on the bottom, Brandon and Taylor. So you can do stuff like that. Some people have the fancy machines that let you do the elaborate scrolling. Again, my machine is nowhere big enough to do that. I can create a pattern, but I would literally need to do the blocks. Do it block by block, pattern it, then stitch blocks together to be able to have it do that. So I've talked long enough. Thank you again, and have a great day. Thanks. Bye.